everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you all. Today's event is to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. And our speaker is Eve Kugler, from Germany, who's a child survivor from Germany. And Eve has been in Northern Ireland all week giving presentations, and this is her final presentation. We are delighted to welcome Eve, and this is a talk I've been personally really looking forward to. We've never had a child survivor speak at our events, so it is a first. I should say Eve has had a really grueling week, and she's going straight to the airport after this. So I think she's certainly done her part this week. I just want to give a wee bit of background, but before that, I'm going to say a big thank you to Holocaust Memorial Trust, who organised this and arranged for this to happen and made this happen. And thanks to Shirley Lennon, who is here, who personally also made this happen. Eve was born in Germany, and in 1938, during Kristallnacht. I know I have not pronounced that right?
1931.
Oh, 1931. Sorry.
Younger,
Okay. He was born in 31, and in 1938, on the eve of Kristallnacht, which I am not pronouncing right.
Kristallnacht.
Okay.
You can do it.
Her family were torn apart and split to the four winds. And her parents went into the camps. One of her sisters went into hiding, and Eve herself was forced to go to America. So this is a very personal story. Now, Eve's going to speak for about 30 minutes, and afterwards we're going to spend about 30 minutes for questions and answers. So feel free to ask anything afterwards. Now, I just want to do a few bits of housekeeping. PRONI has no car parking, as Shirley found out today. And so any parking that's outside is pay display. So if you are parked out there, just really encourage you to pay and display. There is no scheduled fire alarm today. In the event an alarm goes off, just follow myself and Lindsay or Heather or Brett or any member of the staff, and we congregate at the Ark Apartments on the other side of Greens Road. I'll just ask you to put your phones to silent, please, or at least check, just out of respect for the speaker. And finally, this is part of a wider programme of events that PRONI holds over the course of the year. And I should say that this year is PRONI's centenary year. We will be 100 in 22nd of June, and all our events from April onwards are going to be branded as PRONI 100 events. So Shirley, can I invite you to say a word or two? And then we'll invite Eve up.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shirley Lennon, and I'm the Northern Ireland support worker for Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, which, rather than a job, is actually a privilege, because I've got to spend some time with wonderful people like Eve Kugler today. It's my job really to encourage people, groups like PRONI, but individuals and companies and schools, to do things to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. Not simply just to have an event or an activity, but to encourage awareness of the Holocaust so that genocides will stop happening. We don't want these things to continue. And so I really just want to say thank you to the people here in PRONI for helping organise this, but a big thank you to Eve for coming all the way to Northern Ireland. She is a remarkable lady in many ways, and she wanted to be busy. I think perhaps we took her too much at her word and we made her too busy. So I'm apologising to you, Eve, but you are amazing, and we really feel it's been very worthwhile the time you've spent. You've spoken to schools and to other groups, and it's really been wonderful. The theme for Holocaust Memorial Day this year is ordinary people, because ordinary people were the perpetrators, but they were the victims, they were the rescuers as well. Eve is far from ordinary, but I think she would say as well that it was an ordinary family that hers who happened to be a Jewish family that were torn apart by the events of the Holocaust. And so it's up to ordinary people like us to make sure those things don't happen again, and to be careful about the language we use and the actions we do. I let Eve say those things far better than I ever will, and just want to thank you and her companion Rochelle, who she couldn't do without. Anyway, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for the wonderful introductions, and I want to thank all of you for getting up bright and early and being here early in the morning to come and hear me and to come and hear something about the Holocaust. It's well known, but I will repeat that more than 6 million Jewish people were murdered during the Holocaust. I am one of the fortunate few who survived the Holocaust. And so I'm here with you this morning and have been here for a few days, and in general speak to try to make people understand what this 6 million really means, because the number, you can't cope with it. And by telling you the story, my story, and the story of my family, and every survivor's story is a little different, but to give you some sense of what the Holocaust was actually like for Jewish people. So I was born in Germany in a medium-sized city called Halle, and 2 years before Hitler came to power, my family, you see over there, my mom and dad, my sister Ruth is 14 months older than I am, and the little one who's on this photo already, baby Leah, was born actually some years subsequent in 1936. Also living with us, we lived in an apartment house, and we had a nanny who was not Jewish. And furthermore, my paternal grandfather lived with us, Granny having died some years before, having nothing to do with the Holocaust. So he lived with us. He was in his upper 70s. He was a very observant Jewish individual, and he was a wonderful and loving grandfather. So in 1933, in January actually, when Hitler came to power, the persecution of the Jews became apparent almost immediately, because within a few days, signs went up everywhere in our city: Jews forbidden, no Jews allowed. And what this specifically meant is, especially for a child, we were not allowed to use the public ice skating rink. And ice skating was a very popular activity because in cold winters for all of the Jewish children. And as quite a young child of 3 or 4, I already had skates, and I was already not falling over very much, but all of a sudden not allowed. We weren't allowed to go to the cinema in the days before television. So they actually used to make children's films that were shown in the afternoon on the weekends, and this was a special entertainment. No Jews. Jewish bankers, professors were removed from their job. This didn't affect us, but there was a general limit to what Jews were allowed to do and where they were allowed to go. And so the playgrounds were off limits to us as well. We were just generally restricted. And all of those signs, my father began to lose some business. People didn't want to buy from a Jewish store. Some people whispered to my mom they didn't want to be seen in a Jewish store. So life became really uncomfortable for Jewish people. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws were passed, The Nuremberg laws, very well known, set out the limited relations still permitted between Jewish people and non-Jewish people. The most obvious and easily understood one, intermarriage was now illegal. What the no Jews and relationships meant to our family was that our nanny had to go because a non-Jewish woman was not permitted, under the age of 45, listen, think about their mind, was not allowed to live in a Jewish household. They were afraid of some kind of relations between non-Jews and Jewish people. Not that this was ever a matter, but that was the theory behind it. So we lost the nanny. And for me, this was kind of a personal loss. I was used to her. She was always there. With all of the other prohibitions of no Jews allowed doing all kinds of activities, we decided that we would leave Germany. And it's early in the morning. I had wanted to mention something early, which I now see is up here. This is actually 1933. Shortly after Hitler came to power, the people in our city published this list. And what's on here, at the beginning, a list of Jewish lawyers and Jewish doctors, and then a long list of Jewish merchants. And what it says on the top there is, Germans, don't give your money to Jews. Don't shop, don't patronize Jewish people. And the little mark there, of course, is my dad is on the list, and my uncle, who also had a store, was on the list, because the building that we lived in, this apartment house, the entire ground floor was occupied by a store, and it was a mini department store, and that was indeed my father's business. And so we were really, aside from the science, very much almost immediately affected. No Jews, no Jews, no Jews. When the Nuremberg laws were passed, my father had pretty much already decided that it was not a place where the family should be. But around 1935, he very specifically decided we're leaving. He applied for a visa to, I best described as a Jewish mandate of Palestine in those days, which became, in 1948, the nation of Israel. There was an office that the Jewish people maintained in Berlin. My dad made a trip, and he applied for a visa. There were different visas. We could have gone immediately if he had been willing to work on a farm, or if he had skills like being a plumber or an electrician. But he was a businessman, he was a merchant. And so we got what is known as an economic visa. Our name went on a list, and when we got to the top of the list, along with the other merchants, we would have our visa. So we knew that there was a way out for us. That was 1935. That was also the year that my sister Ruth started school. And in 1936, the following year, I started school. There's Ruth, when she started school with this bag of sweets. And as I said, the next year I started school. So 35, we now have the visa, we're on the waiting list. We know we have a way out. And I'm going to talk a little bit about school. I was the only Jewish child in my class. I never had any difficulties. I was very fortunate. The teacher was sympathetic. Not so in my sister's class. It happened that in my sister's class was our cousin, our age, our playmate, Irene. And she was the one the teacher picked on, because there was my sister Ruth and there was Irene. The teacher would call Irene to the front of the room and would say to the other 6 or 7-year-old children, look at this dirty Jewish pig. And then the teacher would hit her. What the Germans used to, instead of hitting, they would box people in the ears. That was the punishment. Now, Irene is one of the people who survived. She was actually hidden, and we were in touch after the war throughout our lives. One of the things I didn't understand and never asked her is why her mother did continue to send her to school, because Jewish children were abused in the schools by their teachers as well as by the students, not just in the play area or maybe on the street, but actually in the classroom, as was the case that I have just described to you. Many Jewish families actually did take their children out of schools in our city, and there were also other schools where the Jewish children were thrown out of schools. This was, in our city, a decision on individual schools, what would happen to Jewish children. So we continue to go to school. Business is getting worse for my dad. We have the visa, and we're waiting and waiting for our visa. Sometime a little bit more than a year, we reached the top of the list. It's now the beginning of 1937, and we're in the middle of packing our belongings, and some of them were going to be shipped. And as we were packing, my dad got a message from the Jewish agency informing him that another man lower on the list was in imminent danger of being arrested in a day or two. He had to leave the country. So he has been given your visa, your place. Nothing will happen to you. You're just a businessman. And indeed, because the Nazis police knew everything that everybody did, the local, the police station was across the street from where we lived. The local police chief knew us very well. Stopped my father one day and said, "Why do you want to leave? Nothing's going to happen to you. You're just a businessman." And my father politely said, "Germany is not the best place for Jewish people anymore." But the gist of this is that there was always somebody in imminent danger. This was the pattern. There we were, number one to leave, and our visa kept being given to others and others and others until we are in October of 1938. At the end of the month, two Nazis appeared at our store, which, as you will remember, is occupying the ground floor of our building. And the Nazis said, "We have come for the old man." The old man, my grandfather Marcus. "He's not here. We will wait," said the Nazis. Grandpa came home from having spent some time with one of his other children, my Aunt Fanny. And my dad could say nothing except, "Papa, you have to go with them." They said it won't be very long. And off Grandpa went, being watched by these tall policemen. And of course, he didn't come back, and he didn't come back. It got dark. My dad went downtown to his brother's house, which was near the main police station, to try to get some news. And when he got there, the apartment was filled with other Jewish people, all talking about men, women, sometimes all families, certainly Jewish families having been arrested. And as they're asking themselves, why them and not us, they realized that the people who were arrested were people who had been born in Poland, or were people born in Germany who were not, had not taken out German citizenship. My dad was a German citizen. Uncle Morris was a German citizen. Grandpa said to his sons, "Leave me alone. Why do we have to bother?" So Grandpa was still a Polish citizen, and he was among the arrested. Eventually, my dad tried to get news from the police station on what was happening, because he had actually gotten a box together with blanket, warm clothing, Grandpa's prayer books, his tallit, his prayer shawl. And when he said to the main station, can you kindly give this box, gave Granddad's name, and he was told, you're too late, we have put them all on a train, we have sent these Jews from Poland back to Poland where they came from, we don't want Jews in Germany. And that was it, Grandpa was gone. Some other relatives of ours, additionally, because as I said, men and women and children, including, by the way, cousin Irene, her older sister Lori, and our cousins, my mom and my dad, the entire family gone. We are in a state of shock, as are the other German Jews who remained. Nothing for us to do. On the night of November 9th, November 10th, pounding on the door in the middle of the night, the local police chief and 5 other Nazis rushed into our apartment. They came to arrest my dad. And while 2 of them watched as Dad got dressed, the rest of them rampaged through our flat, creating disorder, turning over furniture, emptying cupboards of dishes, of clothing, general havoc. And my sister Ruth and I are standing on our bedroom door watching all of this. I'm now not quite 8, Ruth is 9. The local police chief walks by, shoves us back into the room, slams the door in our face, and we learned later that he told my mom, the girls don't need to see this. So what we didn't see is they went into Grandpa's room. Now I told you before, he was very observant and he was a study. Many Jews continued to study the sacred text. He owned a Torah scroll. We use the Torah, which contains the 5 books of the Old Testament that we use in our services. And he also had many sacred books. The Nazis took the Torah scroll, shredded it. They tore the pages of his sacred books from out of the spines of the books, stamped on them. They desecrated everything that was sacred to Jewish people. And so my dad is gone. My mom is in a obviously total state of shock. Did not sleep. The shop assistant rang the bell, pounded on the door in the morning. She's in tears as she says to my mom, you have to come down, you have to come down. Mom put on a coat, went downstairs, and what she saw was the shop windows, the glass windows of our store had been broken, smashed, glass littered the sidewalk, and this became known as the Night of Broken Glass, or in German, Kristallnacht. Nazis were standing there and screaming at my mother, insulting her, clean up this mess. My mom spent the next several hours sweeping up the ground. She's totally exhausted. She's upstairs, and within an hour or so, my Aunt Fanny, my dad's older sister, came with more bad news. Our local synagogue, which Grandpa had established when he came from Poland in the 1890s, 35, whatever number of years ago, where we went for services, where I had started studying. The synagogue had been torched and burned to the ground while the fire brigade watched. This was Kristallnacht because what Aunt Fanny also told us, aside from the burning of the synagogue, she and other relatives came all talking about their husbands, fathers, nephews, sons, men between the ages of 16 and 60, Jewish men had been arrested. Nobody knew what to do. My mother stood up straight, put on her coat, went across the street to the police station and asked, where was my husband? And the answer she got was, he is in the concentration camp of Buchenwald. If you can get him a visa, he can come home from the camp and he can leave the country. We don't want Jews in Germany, the refrain. My mom went to the Jewish agency in Berlin, demanded the visa. They could only apologize. She then spent the next month, some number of weeks, looking for someone who would forge a visa that would pass, that would be acceptable. And eventually she managed this. It cost her some amount of money, which fortunately we had. She presented the visa to the police station, and they said, good, good, your husband will be home. 3 days later, my dad came home from Buchenwald. He said very little. There was no forced labor. There were, in fact, no uniforms. What he did say is that the food was limited and very poor, and that 3 Jewish men had attempted escape. They were caught at barbed wire, brought back to the parade ground. Gallows were set up, and the 3 men, the Jewish men, were strung up. All the Jews were ordered to the parade ground, watching as their comrades were hung, and had to stand there until it got dark. This was Buchenwald. My mom eventually managed to secure a visa that passed, and my father did come home and had to leave the country within 3 days. This was in approximately January of 1939. The visa that she paid for was for France because her sister and brother-in-law had moved to Paris, actually outside of Paris many years before for business reasons. And might as well go where we knew someone. So now, just to review, my grandpa is suddenly gone. My dad was gone, came back, gone again. And the next thing that happened very shortly after Dad left for France is that we were evicted from our home. The Nazis made a list in every city and town in Germany and Austria with a list of a very small number of Jewish homes. Now the Nazis knew where all the Jews lived, their addresses, they had registered everything. If your name was not on the list, out you go, move in with someone who's on the list. Fortunately, my mom's dad, who lived in the city of Leipzig, an hour away, was on the list, and my mom now took my sisters and me to live with my grandpa, who we knew and loved very dearly, but it's not with my mom, not with my dad, it's not in our home, and also, Granddad had already taken in a dozen other Jews, women and some children who had also been made homeless. Everything was very crowded. My mother spent the next 6 months looking for a visa and eventually found one. And in June of 1939, we were able to go to Paris to join my dad. Unfortunately, the visa could not include my granddad, and we had to leave him behind. When we arrived in Paris, we were very poor because Jews were allowed to take out of the country only 10 marks, or the equivalent of 10 pounds each, a total of 40 pounds. Everything else, my mother was, as you see here, forced to sign over to the Nazis. This is a document where she signs over proceeds of insurance payments that my dad had made. She also signed over our bank accounts, investments, the business, everything. And so we arrived, as I said, in Paris, extremely poor, living in a one room in a boarding house, while my dad is desperate to find a visa so that we could leave France and head further away from the Nazis and to the Jewish homeland. He was still looking 2 months later when World War II broke out. A day after the war broke out, French police knocked at the boarding house, came to arrest my father. He protested that he was Jewish, had been in the camp. You are now a German citizen, you are the enemy, you must come with us. So he was again not free. My mom is left with just 3 small children, totally alone, no money. and she learns that in the town where we lived, Montmorency, there was a home for Jewish children set up by a long-standing welfare organization. She placed us in this home. Now, without our mom, we were extremely well treated. I think there is the home, and in the next slide you can see the children doing an entertainment for the moms and dads who came visiting, not the dads, the aunts. One day when my mom was visiting, the director took her aside. The director announced, we need help in the kitchen. Would someone here come and help? Because the Jewish regular help didn't come. My mom was the only one who volunteered. Spent the day in the kitchen, and then 2 weeks later, the director called her again and offered her a job as cook in the kitchen, which my mother, middle-class Jewish woman, gladly accepted. She's now cooking for 200 adults and children with one other cook. This went on as the Nazis are approaching Paris. Our home was near where on the route where the Nazis were going to take. There was a week or so where there were almost nightly bombardments, very scary. We were never hit. Shortly before the Nazis occupied Paris, our home and other children's homes of this agency, everybody was evacuated to central France, where there was another home. The French opened the doors to the camp where they were holding German citizens. My dad eventually made his way to the home. The family is now reunited. Wartime conditions, cold in the wintertime, no fuel, and a great shortage of food. We were always hungry. In the spring of 1941, the Americans issued a limited visa for Jewish children in French concentration camps. The underground anti-Nazis could not get the children out of the camps, and so the visas were given to the Jewish homes. The children chose to go to America were orphans. Shortly before they left, because not enough visa for everyone, 2 children got sick. The only people who could quickly take their place with all the documentation, permission, were my sister Ruth and I, because both my parents were present. 2 visas, nevertheless, our sibling, little Leah, then aged not quite 5, couldn't have come. My mom refused to let her go. She didn't even want us to go. My father won the argument. My sister and Ruth are on our way to America, a dangerous and hazardous 2-month journey. We arrived in New York in September of 1941. Ruth and I became foster children. In the next 5 years, I was in 3 foster homes. She was in 4 because we were not always together. A few months after we arrived in America, correspondence from my parents stopped. I was convinced my parents had perished. You get on with it, you learn English, you have no choice. All I did was cry myself to sleep every night because it was a war, we didn't know what had happened. I will tell you briefly what did happen to my family. In 1942, about a year after we left, there was a mass arrest of German Jews. The French resistance workers came to the home. The first thing we have to do is save the child, and little Leah was taken to a French convent, all by herself. Another Jewish child there took her under her wing, told her how to look after herself and not ever reveal that she is Jewish. And of course, children somehow or other manage, and as is necessary. The resistance could not find a home for my sister, and so therefore they went and lived rough in the mountains. Eventually my parents were arrested. They were in several French concentration camps, including the first one, which was a holding camp before the regular camps, where they spent 3 horrific months with very limited food, no heat, terrible conditions. A single Red Cross nurse for 6,000 Jews who came to the barracks and said, I need someone to help me. My mother was the only one who stood up. She spent 3 months following this woman carrying her supplies, and as the Jews are now being loaded into onto the trains for the concentration camps, The nurse intervened and said, you cannot have them. They are under my supervision. I am Swiss. She harangued the commandant, and he gave in. And my parents and 21 other Jewish prisoners did not join the 5,000 Jews who went to Auschwitz. You'll recall I said something about 6,000. In 3 months, 1,000 Jewish people perished from cold, hunger, disease, terrible conditions. My parents were in several other French concentration camps for the duration of the war, including one which was in Calais, because the British spies and American spies persuaded the Germans that the invasion that the Germans knew was coming from the Brits and the Americans was going to be in Calais. My father did hard, heavy work strengthening the seawall in Calais. He and another Jewish man were chatting that they were not going to live through this because if he didn't work, he was shot. They miraculously planned a successful escape, walked out of the camp, made their way to Paris, lived in the streets of Paris for a while, and eventually my dad made his way to central France, contacted the underground, because they had contact with the resistance through all of this and through the whole. The underground hid him, gave him false papers and gave him a job on the railways. My mom was also somehow got out of the camps and was also released and protected by the underground. I want to mention that this story of the Holocaust where the family was separated but miraculously survived, not all of which I knew, but made my parents relate to me much later as an adult, is told in great detail in a book that I wrote called Shattered Crystals. That book is now available without charge on the internet. My parents and I, the family, wanted everyone to know what happened. Mother said everyone has to know. We're not looking for money. Who even needed the hassle? The book is there. If you Google Shattered Crystals, you can read the entire story of everything that happened to our family. I think that we have some time left for questions. I would like to close my own remarks by quoting Elie Wiesel, the camp prisoner and eventual winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, and what he said, well known, whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness. And you are all joining me, you are witnesses to the history and murder of the Jewish people during the Holocaust. I'm ready to take your questions. Thank you very much.